Good day. My name is Sandy, and I've made a series of videos guiding and supporting students in their journey into their Grade 12 English First Language set work books. With these videos, I'm aiming to introduce you to your set works in a very accessible way. My slogan is everything English, everything easy. So my aim is to give you a manageable introduction to aspects of your set work that will set you up for studying it further and diving into the nitty-gritty and more thorough notes provided to you by your educators. So my disclaimer is, you won't be able to know everything you need to know about your set work just from the videos. They're meant to be a framework or groundwork for you to start building upon. My goal is to provide various types of learning opportunities for students who have different learning styles. Schools and textbooks provide a lot of opportunities for learning for those students who primarily enjoy learning through reading and writing. But the video format aims to provide support for other types of learners. There will be visual information for visual learners, conversational oral information for auditory learners, and our social learners can watch the video in groups. This video is a free video to get you started. In the description, I will include a link so that you can purchase the remaining 4 videos for a very reasonable price, which really takes you into the basics that you need to know. The information I have used to make these videos has been drawn from various study guides and websites, which I will make a record of in my description so that you too can access more information about the set work, should you so wish. This video is an introduction and background to Hamlet. By now, I'm sure you all know Hamlet was a theatre play written by the famous poet William Shakespeare. If you Google who was the most famous poet of all times, Google will tell you it was William Shakespeare. So, as complex as his work is for modern students to understand, it is the study of one of the plays considered by many to be one of the greatest treasures of literature. So, a valuable piece to have studied for anyone wanting a rounded education. Here is my very artistic rendition of a cartoon of the bard, which just means poet, by the way. Sorry, I'm not an artist. The phrase artist Sandy would be an oxymoron. Shakespeare had that very distinctive receding hairline and that famous moustache and beard. Shakespeare started out life as a wannabe actor, not a writer. He left his wife and children with his parents to make his fortune on the stage in about 1587, when he was about 22. From there, he joined an acting crew, and within a few years, he began writing plays, and he quickly shot up to stardom and wealth. Shakespeare wrote Hamlet in about 1601. In fact, Hamlet was written quite far down the list of plays. It was about 22nd in the line from when he started in 1589. What you may not know is that there were actually 2 versions of Hamlet. And I hate to break it to you, but you are studying the longer second version. Also, an unusual fact is that the play was initially called First Quarto when it was published. The full title was The Tragical History of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. The longer version was published as Second Quarto. I'm wondering if you're questioning what on earth you could have in common with a playwright from 400 years ago living in England. I think you'd be surprised. We know that in South Africa, lots of youth end up having to care for younger siblings, and often they have to try help the family with some income. Shakespeare left school at 14 to help his father support the family. In the time Shakespeare was living in London, it was a rapidly growing city with all the problems of overcrowding that plague modern cities. People were flocking to the city to make a living in the industrial centre. And this is very similar to our experiences in South Africa, where people flock to the city centres from the country to try to find work. In Elizabethan London, diseases were rife, particularly the bubonic plague, which was a bacterial infection spread by contact and fleas. In 1592, a breakout of the bubonic plague meant that the theatre where Shakespeare was employed had to close for 2 years. Basically lockdown. Shakespeare and the actors had to go on tour and work for less money during this time. Does that not sound familiar to those of us who lived through the impact of COVID-19? Shakespeare also experienced loss and grief in his life. He lost brothers and sisters to the plague. He lost his son when he was only 11. And there is no record of how his son died, but it's suggested it was the plague. Many of us, even as youngsters, have experienced grief and loss, especially with COVID. On a rather funnier note, I think teens would love to have lived in Elizabethan times because families only bathed once a year. I can't imagine missing my daily shower, but I wonder if my boys would disagree. They seem to find it a terrible chore.
No!
Unlike many poverty-stricken poets who died penniless, Shakespeare made a good living. He retired at 47. I'm well into my 50s, so it makes me a little jumpy that he died at 52. But he died comfortably and a well-off country gentleman. While this seems awfully young to us, or at least to me, as I've outlived him already, life expectancy for men in the 1500s was about 47. So life expectancy was even worse in the cities. So it was considered Shakespeare had a good innings. But Shakespeare is an inspiration to those of us who have dreams and goals that we hope to achieve in our lives. Shakespeare was writing plays for all sorts of people: nobility, workers, intellectuals, and rowdy jokesters. Over the years, Shakespeare wrote several different types or genres of plays, which included comedies, tragedies, and historical plays. What is interesting is that a flag was raised at the theatre to advertise upcoming shows, sort of like a trailer. The colour would identify what type of play it was. A white flag meant a comedy, a black flag meant a tragedy, and a red flag meant historical play. Hamlet is considered by some to be a tragedy, but others have suggested a fourth genre for Shakespearean play, which is a problem play. A problem play is basically a play that presents a number of problems that never get fully resolved through the play. And Hamlet fits into this category. Some have even said that Hamlet is the most problematic play ever written by Shakespeare. Conventions of the day in Elizabethan London was that in tragedies, the main character or protagonist wasn't a hero, but had some flaw in their character, and this protagonist inevitably died in the play. In Hamlet, Shakespeare penned into life a protagonist who was quite unusual in those times, as he displays acute awareness of the moral implications of his actions. Hamlet is also a revenge play, a genre developed in very ancient Roman times. Essentially, a revenge play is when there is a hero who must avenge a deed. And historically, these types of plays included things like madness, pretended madness, the death of the hero. So you'll recognize those aspects in Hamlet. Shakespeare was writing his plays in the times when modern permanent theatres were just becoming a thing. While ancient civilizations had built theatres, in England, theatres had previously just been makeshift and temporary. Proper theatres only began going up in about 1570, and the first famous Globe Theatre was made from the timber of a theatre that was built on leased land, and when that lease couldn't be renewed, the family who owned the theatre itself dismantled it and built it again in 1599 on the south bank of the River Thames. And there it was a great success. The theatre was part owned by several people, including Shakespeare, to help pay for the cost of the land. And the theatre had to be built on a raised earth bank, as the earth was prone to flooding in that region. It was quite a hard building too. It had 3 levels of seating. It was built with multiple sections, so that it was essentially a circle facing the stage. The stage was built out into the yard and was raised above the ground, and the stage also had an upper gallery. There was no roof over the central yard, but the stage had a canopy or roof. The stage also had a trapdoor beneath it, and there were several entrances and exits for the actors. Elizabethans had very simple props and scenery, and only occasionally backdrops. They loved very elaborate costumes, however, going to town on these and using really expensive materials for their costumes. Wealthier patrons could sit in the raised gallery seating, and the central yard was reserved for less wealthy patrons who were often quite noisy and rather rough hooligans. The theatre was a very big attraction to many in the city, and it was well placed amongst other attractions in the area, like bear and bull baiting and gambling houses. A crest with Hercules carrying the globe on his shoulders with the Latin phrase totus mundus agit histrionem was displayed at the entrance to the Globe Theatre. Totus mundus agit histrionem means all the world's a play. One of the things I wondered about when starting my review of Hamlet was, why did Shakespeare make the story set in Denmark? Why not England or anywhere else? And the answer to that is fact there was an ancient Norse legend concerning rulers of Denmark. And in the legend, a brother, Vengi, kills his brother, or Vendel, who is king, and marries his wife. The nephew then feigns madness to protect his life and plots to kill his uncle. Do we recognize this plot? A playwright who died in 1594, Mr. Thomas Kidd, wrote a play on this legend. It is believed that Shakespeare probably based his writing on that play. Hamlet was written 7 years after Mr. Kidd had died, however. There is some controversy as to whether, in fact, Mr. Kidd may actually have been the author of Hamlet. In fact, there's a long-standing conspiracy theory that Shakespeare may not have written the plays attributed to him. Others suggest Shakespeare did borrow earlier plots and stories for his drafts, and then would work with others in producing that final outcome. You can come to your own conclusions. What is fascinating is that Shakespeare's son, who died 5 years before Shakespeare produced Hamlet, was called Hamnet. These names were considered very similar in Shakespeare's time. It's also interesting that Shakespeare wrote Hamlet in the year his father passed away. One wonders how much grief and loss of those two people in his life contributed to the themes of death and loss when he was writing Hamlet. So this is your introduction to the bard, Mr. William Shakespeare, and his great literary play, Hamlet. I hope you found the information interesting. And in the videos, you can expect to see characters and character profiles, the plot step by step, themes found in Hamlet, and understanding Hamlet's soliloquies. I truly hope you will consider investing in this to support your learning. I wish you all the best. Until next time.